Hello everyone. I'm going to show you how to thread a needle and sew on your button. Okay. The first thing you're going to do is finish your 8x8 square if you haven't already done it. Make sure you and your partner are working together to create your 8x8 square. When you're done, then you're going to sew on your button. You are responsible for finding a 4-hole button in the container over on the sewing materials so that you can sew this on. It needs to be a 4-hole button because that's part of your project grade. Okay. You're going to get a spool of thread. I'm going to use a contrasting color from my button so that it's easy for you guys to see my stitches. You do not have to. You can use a matching color for your button. You're going to need your needle and you're going to need a pair of scissors. Once you have all your materials, you need to thread your needle. To thread your needle, you're going to take the spool of thread, you're going to take the tail of the thread or the end of the thread, and you're going to pull so you straightened out your arm. Okay, I'm going to unravel it till it gets to about the shoulder or my neck, and then I'm going to cut. I'm going to take this piece of thread and I'm going to thread it through the end or the eye of my needle. Okay, so a couple of things. This is a very small hole and you got to fit this through here. Trying to focus for you guys. Nope, it won't focus. Okay, so I'm going to take this and I'm going to go through the eye of the needle. If it doesn't go through after a couple of times, you can cut the thread or you can wet it with your tongue so that it pulls all of the strands of the thread together. Once you get it through, you're going to pull the thread halfway through the needle so that you have a double strand. Okay, you want the tails of the thread to meet like this, so you're going to line them up and then you're going to hold them together. You're going to drop your needle onto your desk. You're going to then take your two tails and you want to tie this into a knot. Okay, if you know how to tie a balloon, that's all you have to do is tie a balloon. But if you've never tied a balloon before, I'm going to show you how to tie this into a knot so that it will not go through your fabric. Okay, so you're going to take the two tails that you put together, you're going to pinch them in your thumb and forefinger. Okay, I'm then going to take the thread and I'm going to drape it over top of my forefinger, and then I'm going to slide the thread in between so I create this loop over top of my forefinger. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to roll my forefinger back on my thumb, keeping my thumb in place, which is going to tangle these knots up together, which is what I want. That's going to create the knot. Okay, so I'm going to roll it back like this. See how it gets all tangled up like that? That's what I want. I'm going to put my middle finger on too, and then I'm going to very carefully pull away until it comes out of my fingers, and then you can see I've got a little knot right there. That's what you want, is you want this little knot. Okay, that knot's going to prevent your thread from going through your fabric. Next thing you're going to do once you've threaded your needle is to take the 8x8 square and you're going to figure out where you're going to put your button. I do not want you to put your button in the corner, and I do not want you to put it next to the edge. I want you to find a spot in the middle somewhere to put your button. Okay, once you locate the spot you want to put your button, you're going to hold it in place. You're going to take your needle, you're going to go back on the ugly side of your fabric. Okay, so I'm underneath. I'm on the other side. I'm going to put the needle through the fabric and the buttonhole. You got to find the buttonhole. Okay, so now I found the buttonhole. I'm going to push the needle all the way through. So it's going to come out on this side. See how it's in the buttonhole? And I'm going to pull until I can gently tug. And when I gently tug, it's not going to come through. Okay, that means it's tied in a nice knot. I'm going to go to the opposite buttonhole. So now I've created my first stitch that's across the button. I'm going to come up through my third buttonhole. Then I'm going to go through my fourth buttonhole, so that when I pull this through, I should have an X or a plus sign. Okay, that's the first step. Step 2 is to go through all 4 buttonholes again. So I'm going to come up, I'm going to go across, come up through a third hole. I don't have to repeat the same pattern, I can do a different pattern, it's okay. And go through the fourth hole. Okay, so that's step 2. Now I've gone through all 4 buttonholes twice. Next step is I'm going to create a nice bunch of stitches underneath here that are going to keep my button on, and it's going to allow me to have that little bit of space so that if I needed to close my button on my shirt, I would have that little bit of space between the fabric and the button, which is going to allow it to go through the buttonhole. Okay, so the way that I do that is I'm going to come up through, so I'm on the back of the fabric right now. My needle is hanging through the back of the fabric. I'm going to go back through the back of the fabric and come up behind the button. Okay, very important. See that? See how I'm behind the button? My needle is behind the button. I'm not coming up through a buttonhole. I'm going to pull the thread through. Now I'm going to loop the thread around the button 3 times. 1, 2, 3. So now I've looped around 3 times. If you look underneath here, you're going to see those loops. That's going to create that nice little cushion between the button and the fabric, and it's going to allow the button to be nice and strong so it stays on your fabric. Okay, now I don't want this needle hanging off the front, so I'm going to go right back down behind the button to go back to the back of my fabric. See how I cannot see any stitches except for on the buttonhole? I don't see any stitches around here. That's very important. But when I flip over, I'm going to see all my stitches. Okay? Now, there's another important step that you have to do when you're sewing. It's called ending your stitch. If you don't end your stitch, anything that you just created is going to fall off. Okay? So I'm going to take my needle. I'm going to go to wherever my last stitch is. See where my thread's coming out? Okay? I'm going to insert the needle right next to my last stitch. I'm going to go through both, and then I'm going to take the thread and go underneath the tip of the needle, and then I'm going to push the needle all the way through. So then when I pull all the way through, see how it's kind of looped around each other? When I pull it tight, it creates a small knot there for me, which is going to make sure that my stitches don't come apart. As a rule, I always do it twice, so I just went right underneath my last stitch. I'm going to put the thread underneath my needle. I'm going to pull my needle all the way through. I'm going to pull it tight, so now it's created a little knot for me right there. That's going to keep my stitches together. Whenever I do this, I always cut the needle off from the thread somewhere between 1/2 inch and 3/4 of an inch away from the last stitch. So now when I cut this thread, my needle comes off, so I can use that for my next part of the project, and then my button is attached. And all of these stitches are right here, so I can see all of the stitches for my button, and my button is wonderfully attached correctly. Okay. If you need to watch this video again, you can go over to my computers, and it's in the Student Common folder, so you can watch it as many times as you need to. Okay. If you have any questions, save them for me for the next time you see me. Thank you.